Just you mentioned danger. I just want to bring it up, reality, so people understand the reality of this. You yourself were seriously wounded a couple years ago by a Ukrainian drone attack. Can you tell us about that attack? And I think there was a special aspect to the attack as well. It wasn't just a normal drone grenade. They hit you with a more serious weapon.
Well, I will tell you the entire story. My colleague and my friend Dennis, you know him pretty well. We were in the same unit and we were transporting the food and medicines and drugs to our soldiers from the Moscow volunteers. That was just an aid. And we came to one unit and we decided to go to another unit, and it was a late evening. It started being pretty dark, so we left this village and we were going down the road, and Dennis told me that probably one of the wheel was flat. We need to stop to get out, so we stopped at a tree. I get off and I saw that left front wheel was a little bit flat, and then we started hearing a drone noise in the air. It was a small drone. It was probably a scout drone, but with the certain function to drop a small grenade or bomb. We started shooting at this drone. I was using my machine gun and Dennis was using a rifle, but I was not able to hit them because this drone was moving pretty fast and it was quite difficult to actually to kill the drone from the machine gun, and the altitude was around 250 meters. It was pretty difficult to hit them, but however I had a radio electronic rifle in the car and his anti-drone rifle, and I tried to close the communication channel for the drone. However, it didn't work because the drone stayed connected, but he started staggering or moving from side to side, and the drone operator wasn't able actually to hit us exactly. Then it dropped the grenade, not exactly us, probably about 10 meters away from us, and we actually decided to fall down on the ground. We started protecting ourselves, and I got 3 shrapnel wounds, and Dennis got 5 wounds, and this particular grenade was with the chemical agents, because we also got significant burnings around every single wound, and our skin started burning even in seconds. It was very painful, very unpleasant. However, we were delivered to the hospital. We were saved. However, these burns stayed for the next 6 months. Usually, if you are wounded by shrapnel, probably in about 40-45 days, you are okay, but these burns were very deep, and we spent 6 months in order to recover. Let's talk about the fact that Ukraine is using chemical weapons very actively on the front line. That was the first time when I was actually attacked by the chemical weapons. But the first time that was the gas, was with a certain chlor inside, when we were fighting for Mariupol next to the Azovstal plant. Ukrainians started shooting us with the grenades, with the mines from the copters, and they had gas inside. I also got burns of my airways, and it was also very unpleasant. I still coughing, and I need to drink water pretty often, and otherwise it's not really pleasant for the people I talk to.
What has the international community said about these chemical weapons attacks? I mean, this is a massive violation of international law, a violation of a global understanding regarding the prohibition of the use of chemical weapons. And just so people understand, this isn't propaganda. I've seen the photographs. I mean, we were communicating right after, because as you said, Dennis and you are friends of mine, and I was aware of what happened. This is as real as it gets. Has the international community come to your support and asked questions and sought to investigate?
As you know, we haven't no request from any international organization. for this particular topic. But if I talk about the proofs for using chemical weapons by Ukrainians in the Ukrainian internet, there are a lot of video materials where the Ukrainian soldiers, drone operators, this Magyar, who is the head of the drone army, they are using the chemical grenades, chemical weapons against the Russian soldiers, and they also record videos how they do it, and they download then these videos to the internet. That's actually not a top secret information. You can really freely find it everywhere. That's a very stupid thing, because they provide the proofs against themselves. And quite often we can see on this video that the chemical grenades with the NATO designation in Latin. These are not Russian grenades, no Ukrainian grenades. These grenades were supplied by a NATO country.
Thank you for sharing that. It's an unpleasant story, but it's a necessary story for people to understand the reality of what's happening there. You come from a military family. Your father served in the Soviet Navy, stationed in Crimea, and he played a very important role, I understand, in making sure that when Ukraine became independent, that Russia didn't lose access to the base. Could you tell us about your father and about that story and how that influenced you?
You're absolutely right. I'm from a military family, and my father was a Soviet officer. My grandfathers, my uncles, they were all military officers. They used to be in the Russian Empire, then in the Soviet Army, and I currently serving the Great Russia. And I think we are a really military officer dynasty. And for all my life, I would like to be really at the same level as my fathers, my grandfathers, because my father was a real lighthouse, a guiding star for me. And his example and the example of my grandfathers definitely made a very significant impact on my career, on my choice in life. And if I'm talk about my father's influence on the split of the Black Sea Marine, I will tell you that my father was the head of the Brigade 37 in Sevastopol. Brigade was quite a significant combination or set of ships, of dozens of different ships. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Ukrainian president called to split the Black Sea Marine, and the brigade headed by my father, all the ships, they raised the Russian Andreev's Navy flag, and the entire Union, the Ukrainian brigade, remained with the Russian Navy. And then the father was appointed, was named the personal enemy of the Ukrainian president. That's the story. So the Russian Spring started for me in 1991, 1992, when the Navy was split, was segregated. The entire country collapsed, the entire army collapsed, even the families collapsed and got split, and divorced, because some of the people in the families, members of the families, wanted to be in different countries. And this frontier went through the families as well.
You mentioned your grandfather. He served in a specialized unit, SMERSH, counterintelligence, and he was heavily involved in destroying the Banderist movement. Tell us, were you aware of what he did? And today, you're sort of following in his footsteps, fighting the Banderists today. Can you talk about your grandfather and his influence on the work you do today?
It was actually my grandfather, my grandfather, and I was named in his honor young. He was actually serving before the October Revolution in Russia. But after the October Revolution, when the Soviet Union replaced the Russian Empire, my grandfather, so the father of my grandmother, he was a military specialist, so he was serving the Soviet Secret Service, NKVD, and during the Great Patriotic War, he was in Smash. That was a death to the spies. That was the official name of this particular unit, and the Smash was fighting against the reconnoiters of the Germans, and my grandfather was actually fighting against the Banderists, especially the Banderist commanders behind the front line. And after the win in Great Patriotic War, my grandfather continued to fight Banderists in Ukraine, because there were a lot of them there. I'm not actually following his footsteps. I'm just completing the work he started, and I'm proud about it.
You have a lot to be proud of. 2 years ago, I visited the special military operation area of operations of the Donbass. And at that time, Ukraine was preparing for a summer counteroffensive, June of 2023. And it ran its course. Can you tell us, what has changed between when I visited 2 years ago and today? How has the war changed? What happened after the counteroffensive? Are the Ukrainians still attacking? Are the Russians defending, or are the Russians counterattacking? How is the front developing?
In 2023, Ukraine planned and started its big counter-offensive. It was aimed at southern regions, which we freed before, especially in Zaporizhia and Kherson, and the Ukrainians undertook this counteroffensive along the entire front line, and it really cost Ukraine a lot of soldiers and men. And because I have been doing my favorite job for a long time, there was a conflict of tactic of application, because the Soviet tactics, which was taught at the Soviet military schools, and the tactics of application, which was pretty widely used by the NATO countries. And as far as I know, that the NATO officers required to use the NATO tactics and to use the weapons supplied by the NATO countries. And this conflict of tactics, when an officer was taught to do one way and then he was actually required to do another way, that was a kind of probably a mismatch of what actually led to the missuccess of this counteroffensive. And not all the military types were used, and not all military types were suiting for this counteroffensive. I'm thought not the entire equipment was actually suiting this counteroffensive. For example, the large bottle tanks, because all NATO bottle tanks, they are usually very heavy machines, and they were not able to go over the bridge, to go over the existing roads, because their weight was too heavy, and that's why they were very slow. And if I talk about some moments, for example, there was no good preparation, and it resulted in the poor supply of the front line. At some front places, the Ukrainians succeeded, but they not really far away. With the special commanders or with the strike fighters, they were actually able to break into our defense. However, this supply was not good enough, because we were able to round them, and they surrounded because they had no supplies, no medical aid, and so on. That was a big mistake. So these small striking groups, they were pretty successful in a short period of time, but they were all killed in actions afterward. Now Russia is advancing. Now Russia is making an offensive. We are moving forward. Unfortunately, moving not so fast as we want. It is definitely fought by drones, by drone systems used by both sides, by Ukrainians and us, Russians.
Again, referring to the history of your grandfather, and you said you're completing his work. How much influence do the Banderists have over the special military operation over Ukraine? In 2022, the Azov Battalion was headquartered in Mariupol, and there was some very heavy fighting to to liberate Mariupol from the Azov battalion, and thousands of them surrendered. But today we see that they've resurrected as not just a battalion, not just a brigade, but a corps. It seems that the Banderists are becoming even more influential in Ukraine. Is this true? And then what's to be done? How do you deal with this issue of Banderism?
If I talk about the Banderists, these are classic neo-Nazis. They actually don't support its own people. Even the German generals said after World War II, if you would like to have an effective war against the Russian, you need to put Ukraine and Russia into strike, because Ukrainians and Russians used to be the same folk, the same nation. Some of these people lived in the south and some in the north. I wouldn't say the Ukrainian is a separate language. That's just a Russian language with its certain peculiarities, with its certain words taken from Polish, Czech. That's a kind of mixture of language, but the Ukrainian is a Russian language as the base. And Ukraine has never been an independent country. There was only the Russian Empire, and Ukraine were just the southern regions in the Russian Empire. That's a kind of pseudo country. It's an artificial country created after the collapse of the Soviet Union. That's actually what our enemies created at the end of the Cold War. And this Nazi map, Nazi card, is played by someone in the world, because that's a very good ground for a new world, when you can put the problems of your folk on the folk from another country, from other nations, and because you can say your neighbors, they're guilty of everything, they ate your bread, they stole this or that from your country. And there are unfortunately a lot of people who believe in it, and there are those nationalist Nazis who believe in it. They actually are really pretty patient, but they're not really smart. And there are so-called professional Nazis, and they become Nazis because they are paid for it. And there are a lot of them working in media, and there are a lot of them in the army. And when the war started, it was not in 2022, when the special and military operation started, and the war in Donbass started in 2014. And this war was started by the Nazi units, by the bandit units, because they were paid for it. And if we talk about the Azov unit, Azov, that was a unit of the Ukrainian National Guard, but it's a previous nationalist battalion consisting of Banderists and bandits. And this Nazi idea was left there in order to unite the soldiers. And it was a new religion designed for the soldiers in this kind of units, and I will explain you why. And they got a new religion that was a cult of death, the cult of pseudo-Slavic gods. There is a lot of things there. They have also Scandic gods, the ancient Slavic gods. I also mentioned that, and it is done in order to separate them from the Ukrainian nation, from their families. Because we also have mothers, grandmothers, they usually go to church because we are Orthodox. And in order to segregate, to separate them from their families, a new religion was designed, was developed for them. They were also free of any criminal crimes they made. So those regions and cities where these Nazi units were located, they were had no responsibility for the crimes they made. They were always well equipped. They felt themselves as the military guards. So there was no criminal punishment for them, and this very good supply, and they felt themselves as a significant power. They're still a significant and an important power in Ukraine, and they are more an ideological and political power in Ukraine, because the number of these Nazis is not so great as the number of Ukrainian soldiers. But when we actually got Mariupol, and many of them surrendered, and those who stayed in the Ukrainian army, they were actually dispersed through different Ukrainian army units as the carriers of nationalist idea. Because there is a capellan in the army, it's a kind of Nazi capellan in the army. watching that everyone should follow the Nazi ideology. And what is the reason of this Nazi ideology? Because the aim is actually that we are not people. Ukrainians don't consider us not as a people. They explain that the Russians are not people. It is much easier to kill an animal than a human being, because we all also eat meat. For example, I had an eye for my breakfast, and nobody cares about this future chicken. We can eat eggs every single morning, and we don't care about it. And that's how they consider us. But they can kill us. They have no moral responsibility in front of the God.
Thanks. Just again, we're talking about Azov, but the Nazis operate under different names: the Kraken Battalion, Adar, and others. So it's not just Azov. It's symptomatic of the Ukrainian experience. We're coming into the 5th year of this conflict. I mean, when the special military operation began in February 2022, many people, including myself, thought it would be a much quicker operation. Obviously, it was far more complicated. The Russian leadership was dealing with more issues than just the front. They were dealing with economic issues, geopolitical issues, etc. And then, of course, the West just poured hundreds of billions of dollars in equipment into this conflict. So it's dragged on. I'm watching the war from afar. You live it up close and personal. You have your finger on the pulse of Donetsk society. How are the people of Donetsk taking this? Are they tired? Are they willing to compromise for peace? Will they fight to the end? Is it a mixture of both? What's the mood in Donetsk today about the special military operation, about this war?
The question is absolutely correct, because that's the 5th year of special military operation. It's very difficult for civilians, especially for civilians, as you know, because we are all people, we're human beings, and we all would like to have a stable future for us, for our children, and we would like to know that you can have a job tomorrow and you can earn enough money for your family. That's the stability everyone wants. However, for these almost 4.5 years of war against the nationalist regime in Ukraine, even not the people in Donbass or people in Ukraine come to an opinion that shouldn't go along with these guys, because this renaissance of fascism, that's the main fundament, the main idea of the Ukrainian regime, and the people in Donbass have been understood it a long time ago. That's why the Donbass people decided to be with Russia, and we helped them to survive. If Donbass had not been returned to Russia, these people had been eliminated. Because at the beginning of the special military operation, the people in the eastern Ukraine were not considered as people by the western Ukrainians, and there were only 2 ways: either to kill them or to make slaves or enslave them. And we understood it was difficult, but we had to fight, because nobody in Donbass would like to return to Ukraine. And even the many Ukrainian citizens came to the same thinking after these years of war, because some people lost people, and Ukrainian economy is actually not down. It doesn't exist anymore. There is no state. The Ukrainian state is not sovereign. The Ukrainian state cannot make decisions in the internal and external policy. It is not a state anymore. And many in Ukraine think they shouldn't stay with this regime anymore. And in Donbass, we understand we need to win, we have to win, and nobody would like to return to Ukraine, because that's death.
Well, then let me ask a follow-on question that might be more difficult. Are the people of Donetsk losing confidence in Moscow's ability to win this war? You say the people of Donetsk understand this war must be won, that there is no alternative. To compromise is to accept slavery, is to accept what has happened to them. Is there confidence in the Russian leadership today to finish this war? Do they believe that Russia is going to finish this war, or are they afraid that Moscow may make a compromise in the interests of greater Russia?
There is no disappointment. There is no disappointment of this return to Russia. However, everybody are very tired, got really tired within these years of war, but everybody understands that we are going the right way, that we need to win, and everybody is sure we will win. Everybody is really sure of that. When the war was started in 2014, and it was started not by us, but the Ukrainian Nazi regime, and many years have passed since 2014, and the special military operation where we carry out an open war with the Ukrainian Nazi regime, and the war has been lasting for almost 4.5 years, and we have been winning all this time because we have been advancing. We free our territories and the minds of people, what is the most important thing. And many people started understanding, both in Ukraine, in European countries, and I understand that NATO countries are not the real enemies, but these NATO countries have a deficit, have a lack of a trusted information, the real information from Donbass. If we count those media which send their representatives to Starobelsk after bombing, just really few of them came there. And I'm talking about the accredited journalists and reporters from the Great Britain or the United States. They didn't even go there. They don't want to show the truth. However, we have the internet, which can be used by everyone, and those who would like to get the real information, they understand that Ukraine is a Nazi regime eliminating civilians. We are not sure of our win because Russia, as the only country, has been fighting against the entire NATO, against 70 countries, and Ukraine is just a battlefield. And NATO, as an alliance, purchased Ukraine as a country, as a tool to fight against Russia in order to make the Russia weaker. NATO is not able to eliminate Russia, and Ukraine is a kind of private military company which was hired to fight against Russia. So we have been really resisting successfully against 70 countries in Ukraine. And we keep advancing and our positions are strong. As for the compromises from Russia and for the peaceful process, the Russian leader has told many times that we are open to sit at the table. We are ready to discuss. We are really ready to sign a real peace treaty. But this peace is not something what is needed by Ukraine or by EU countries, because all these countries supplied military equipment and money to Ukraine, and their leaders earned a lot on this aid. And if all this aid was really had been really delivered to the front, it would have been really much more difficult for us. But as for Zelensky and all his colleagues, they really depend on war, because when the war is going on, they are safe. Because when the war is over, the prosecutor comes to Zelensky and asks, why the corruption is so high, or why you stole so much money from Europe. They really stole this money, and they shared the stolen money with European leaders. And the European leaders may say, we believed in this good guy, but he turned to be a really bad guy. We are not guilty of that. He is a bad guy. But that's why everyone is willing to continue the war. Only the civilians in Donbass don't want this war.
I was at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, SPIEF, a great honor and privilege. And I watched President Putin deliver his message and answer questions. At one point in time, he talked about a letter that was written by the Ukrainian president or somebody. But his response was interesting, because at the end, after dismissing the letter, he turned to the camera and he issued a directive in a very formal term. This is a message to the generals, the admirals, the soldiers, the sailors, go forth, do your job. And then he said something that was, let's work, brothers. Mixing two genres, the old Great Patriotic War directive of the military with a heroic statement made by a Dagestani police officer before he was executed by terrorists. When you listened to that, how did you feel? I mean, did it instill confidence in you? Did you see it as empty words? How did you feel when you heard your president make those statements?
These words by our president, by our leader, is not an empty sound. We really wanted to hear it. I'm really happy to hear it. First of all, I really will implement this order, this directive, and next week I will come back to the front line. We will also bring the absolutely brand new military equipment which has not been used before. We will test it in fight, in action. We'll use this upgraded weapon. That is one of my main directions in my work. I will just fulfill this order, this directive, because many of us have been waiting for this directive, for this order, and we understand we are going the right way. We have to win. When Zelensky was writing this letter, probably he hasn't signed it because he was not brave enough to sign this open letter. He didn't want a peace. It didn't want the peace. It was just a provocation. And because Zelensky and his clique can only provoke, they can only show beautiful pictures in the media, but when the truth is not with you, the rest is empty.
Now, first of all, thank you for the answer. I think it's important because I'm not a Russian, and I heard those words, and they stirred me. And I'm glad to hear that they stirred you, who is fighting on the front. But you're in Moscow right now, doing important work. But I walk the streets of Moscow, and I see people in the streets living their life. There is no war. I go to restaurants, and they're full of people enjoying life, which is their privilege. This is what life is supposed to be. Life isn't supposed to be suffering. Life isn't supposed to be unhappy. Life is supposed to be meant to be lived with handsome men walking next to beautiful women down the streets, enjoying life. But when you see that, do you think they felt the same way when they heard your president's words? Do you think the war resonates with them as much? Are there two Russias? Is there the Russia of the heroes at the front and the other Russia that's living in comfort and peace and somewhat in denial about this war?
The question is really brilliant, and I will answer it in the following way. I'm living in two worlds. World one, that's my front. There where the military operation, where the fights, where the actions are taking place, that's a hell. That's a world of fear, of hunger, and all the disasters. It is very unpleasant there. When I come to meetings to Moscow or Sevastopol, I come to another world, to a world without a war, without a fear, without a death. That's a normal world which keeps living as it used to be before the war. I have a daughter. She's 17 years old, and she is a university student, and she also has fellow students at the university, and they also go to parties, they go to cinemas, to theaters, and they walk down the streets, they date and eat ice cream as the people should do. And I have no jealousy towards this world. Understand, I am in this awful world in order to keep the second world as it is, because my daughter, my relatives, all other people in Russia should live as they used to live before the war started. That's why I'm there in World One. And if you say that everyone should stand up and go to war, I don't think it is something what should be done. Everyone should do what he or she is supposed to do. Some people take the weapon and defend its motherland, its homeland. The other people who should give something to the front as supplies. And I know that some people, after their daily job, they go to some clubs, to some enterprises. They prepare the nets for us. They also care about the humanitarian aid for us. And there are a lot of those people in Russian cities. There are a lot of people helping us. Most of the Russians help us or understand it. So everyone has his or her own place in this life. And if you only work and you pay taxes, that's also a good aid to the front. So everyone has his or her own place in this life, and I'm not really jealous. I'm not jealous. We are there at the front line for those people to live here their usual life.
Well, thank you for that. Just to say, I've come back and forth to Russia several times over the course of the last year, and I had the honor and privilege of visiting Russian citizens who volunteered to weave nets and to make equipment, to pack food and to pack stuff and send it to the front for the soldiers. In St. Petersburg, a wonderful volunteer group. In Moscow, the same. So the Russian people are behind you. I mean, it's obvious to me. I'm just going to ask a personal question. Don't get mad. But you mentioned your daughter. She's 17 years old. She's a university student. How did you feel about Starobelsk, the attack on the college? That could have been your daughter, who was sleeping in a dormitory, murdered by Ukrainian drones. Did the fact that you have a daughter who is college age, did this horrific crime resonate with you even deeper?
Because for me and for other people having traditional human values, we don't. Our children, every child is also our child. It's not someone else's child. And this attack against the dormitory, against this college where the children died, that's another crime of the Ukrainian regime, of Ukrainian neo-Nazis, supported, unfortunately, by the entire Europe. And it's not the first crime of this Nazi regime against Russian civilians. They bomb civilian facilities and they target civilian facilities. They also bomb and attack the intercity buses. And civilian intercity bus cannot be a bottle tank. It looks different. Now we have a lot of drones in action, and the current tactics of fight is different. It's not something what even we had even 10 years ago. This war is absolutely different. But I would like to tell you one thing. All these drones, that's a high precision military weapons. That's not an artillery, which may also shoot a grenade and can fall somewhere. And probably the artillerists, they don't really know where the target exactly is. However, the operators, the drone operators, no matter where the drone is, in the air or in the sea, he or she always sees the target. And I would like to tell you an awful story. That was 2022, when a grandmother was walking down the street with a small boy. The boy was probably 3 years old, not older. And the Ukrainian drone came to the yard and started threatening the boy, and the boy started trying to run away from his drone. And the grandmother was an old lady. She tried to do, and then this sadist actually threw a grenade on this boy. The boy was killed, and the grandmother was wounded, and the drone operator saw what he was doing, that was just a 3-year-old boy with his grandmother. And the children, all the children are not someone else's children. And I really was disappointed, was down after this tragedy in Starobelsk, and that my daughter was lucky not to be there. And these crimes, that's something what the Ukrainians should be responsible for. And after a win, we will find all of them and we will bring them to court. Everyone will be brought to the court. And for these people, the biggest fear is to come to court because as the criminal, and they should be sentenced till the last day of their life because they have to stay in prison until they die.
Let me just get some clarity on this. You're a warrior. You fought in a war, you're fighting in a war, and you're called upon to kill your enemy. And your enemy is called upon to kill you. But there are laws of war. There are rules, there are regulations, there are norms of civilized society that even the military must obey and adhere to. Drones are a new weapon. But as you said, they're not a area strike weapon like artillery. They're a precision guided weapon where there's somebody's eyes on the target, eyes attached to a brain, attached to a heart, eyes who know the difference between right and wrong. Are you saying that drone operators who violate the laws of war by deliberately targeting civilians will be held to account after this war?
Yes, definitely, they should be counted for that because there is such a term, criminal order, and this criminal order is stated in the legal system of every single country. When a soldier understands that the order by a commander is a criminal order, the soldier is entitled not to fulfill it. That's why the decision to fulfill these orders, that's something what every single soldier decides, because the soldier can refuse and just say that is actually anti-human order because that was something that was break the God's law. Unfortunately, we see a lot of cases that we show the sadism of the Ukrainian soldiers and operators when they assassinate civilians. There is a video somewhere in the internet, for example, when civilians were leaving Pokrovsk, they were trying to leave that city. It was really scaring there, and an old lady was pulling a trolley after her, and the grandmother kneed in front of the drone, and the drone killed her. What should the operator have in his mind do it? It was not an order. A drone is pretty expensive. A drone is aimed against the enemy soldiers, so it should be used in order to eliminate a real military target, but to kill a old lady with a trolley, I think that was not an order. It was just something what an operator decided to do, and we are currently to free the earth of these bastards.
Because when you look at the Ukrainian military today, we know they're having trouble recruiting. And the people they are recruiting tend to be recruited not into the infantry or the artillery or the armor, but into the drone campaign. You're talking about 80,000 new recruits being trained in the drone warfare, etc. Maybe they should be told by the Russian government that if you violate the law, we will hunt you down and we will bring you to justice. Because right now, it just seems that you look at what's happening in Donetsk today, in Donbass, and the drones are attacking buses, they're attacking cars, they're attacking civilian sites, they're attacking everything, as if there's immunity for this. It's just, I mean, who am I? I'm just an American observing, but I think they might lose their enthusiasm for the war if they understand that everything they do is being recorded, and at some point in time when this war ends, they will be brought to justice. Maybe that'll help them stop or not do the next crime. I don't know. That's just my speculation. You can comment on that if you'd like to.
I think it is not really difficult to comment these enemy's actions, because the Ukrainian army, they also use some mental drugs, and that's a norm there. They don't fight against the drug addiction, and these mental drugs are also distributed among Ukrainian soldiers in order not to feel the conscience, not to feel the fear. That's why these sadists have no fear. They think they can live forever. And we will definitely hunt for them, either the justice or our striker.
I was curious at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, President Putin was asked specifically about drones and asked specifically about the necessity of, because it's a new weapon, and coming up with a framework of the laws to control drones, because it's a horrible weapon. And I think that the world needs to understand that the drones are directly controlled by people, and the people must be held accountable to what they do with their drones. So your president was quite correct. You mentioned that you're here to, and I'm just repeating your words, to get new weaponry, new devices. I'm not going to ask what it is. We'll find out soon enough, I imagine. And you're going to bring it to the front where you're going to get to work. Europe just passed $90 billion euro budget. The United States government, sadly, has approved another couple $billion to provide military assistance to the Ukrainians. And that assistance will come to the Ukrainian army, and they'll take it to the front where you'll be fighting. Do you see the front just stagnating, or do you feel optimism that Russia has the advantage and that there will be a decisive moment this summer? Do you feel optimistic about this summer, or is this just going to be another grinding summer of blood and death and destruction?
As I said in the beginning of our interview, we, as a Russian military, keep at the one thing. Both we and the Ukrainian enemies have drones as equipment. It's not only something what is flying in the air. We have also ground drones. We have also sea drones. They can really operate in all these three environments. And the use of drones can also has also an impact on the war. That's why we are advancing very slow, because we really would like to save our people, and we know that we will win, and we keep moving forward every single day. And if you look at the front news, we keep moving every single day. We advancing, and we are sure of our win, and we are sure that we will keep moving forward. However, these drones do have impact on the war, and there is a kind of competition right now between the drone operators, between the drone designers and makers, and the drones themselves, and how the drones are used. And this competition is constant, and the competition is getting higher and higher, because every single day we get something new. In every single fight, a single action, that's a correction of previous errors. And I will bring new drones to the front. I'm not allowed to tell you anything about them. These are absolutely new systems, and they will definitely help and save people's life. That's very important.
Okay, here's a hypothetical. You're in downtown Moscow. You're going up a hotel to meet somebody at the top floor, and you step into the elevator, and in walks a man. It's Donald Trump, the President of the United States, and somehow he's left his security behind and the door shuts, and it's just you and Donald Trump. You're going up the elevator. You have very limited time. What do you tell him? What would you say to the American president about this conflict, about U.S.-Russian relations?
I think it's a very complicated question for me. Yes, I'm someone who is pretty well known. Now I do have a certain experience. I also can make an impact, but what can I ask or can I request from the US president? This person is at a very high level, and what can I advise to the person who is fully ignoring the international legal norms? For example, what happened in Venezuela, we observed there, he did there what he wanted. What can I ask him to do? What can I request from him? Because this person used to do what he only wants. And I wouldn't say that our conversation would be productive. I will probably ask him to participate more actively in a peaceful process and stop supporting the Nazi regime. And Ukraine probably hasn't seen these swastikas on their shoulders. Probably he hasn't seen any fascist symbol signs on the Ukrainian military equipment. Probably he hasn't seen the fire demonstrations by the Nazis. Maybe he doesn't know, after the Nazis came to power in Ukraine, they started controlling the Troitsky-Pecharsk Lavra, the monastery in Kiev. And actually the bones of the Russian holy people started disappearing, and the rest of the Nazi leaders from World War II, from Great Battle War, started being brought to Ukraine, and Ukraine is currently substituting the ideology and the religion, because they substitute the holy bones with the bones of these bastards. Because Ukraine is not the state what Mr. Trump may think of, because Ukraine is actually an example of anti-human actions, anti-Russian actions. They even did more than the Nazis did during World War II. Maybe Mr. Trump should look more at the country he supports. Maybe he doesn't know something, and if he finds out what is really happening there, he may refuse supporting it.
Not just the American president, but the American people need to hear this as well. Our two sides fought as allies 80 plus years ago to defeat Nazi Germany, to defeat the scourge of this fascist ideology. And today, the United States is supporting the very thing that we once opposed. It's only natural that we be allies.